how many of us feel like the years we've spent doing something else before we touched clay were wasted time? You know, now that we've discovered clay. Or maybe we were introduced to clay a long time ago, but thought that it wasn't possibly a career choice and are coming back to it after a few decades of making a living in other ways. One way or another, we think to ourselves, oh, if I had just stuck with this, if I had found it sooner, I would be in such a different place now. And while that might be true, I can also guarantee every single one of us, myself included, that we would not be making the type of work we each make. We wouldn't be drawn to our own unique styles without those specific life experiences that came before this moment. This is what I mean when I use the phrase background knowledge for the title of today's episode with Larissa Warren of Ratbag Studios. Larissa's previous career as a teacher directly informs how she has set up her full-time studio now. But also, Larissa used that particular phrase, background knowledge, specifically in our conversation today when discussing the background knowledge of learning the materials that she works with and intentionally choosing those materials because they connect with her style specifically. While so many of us scour the internet for a quick and easy answer to what another artist uses for clay or glaze or firing materials or types of kilns or any of the rest of it, what material do they make those stencils out of that you admire? Or how do you insert whatever unique style question we have here? Well, maybe the key to figuring out all of those questions is actually found in the trial and error and testing process that comes with finding our own unique solutions. You'll have to discover your own answer to that question, of course, but I think today's chat with Larissa, who has also only recently gone full-time in her studio practice about 5 years ago, which makes their family and household 100% self-employed, I think this chat is going to give you lots of food for thought. And we'll dig into all of it right after a quick word from our sponsor.
Hello, I'm Bryce, Account Manager and Sales Solution Supervisor at Amico Brett, providing you with the best customer service in ceramics. This episode is brought to you by Amico Brett. Find Amico glazes and equipment at your local distributor. Welcome to Clay, and thank you for listening.
Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 13 years, Rebecca Ikes-Gara. Hey, Larissa, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
I was just saying before we officially hit record, I feel like we've been talking about doing this for a very long time and started with one subject, and now I have no idea where we're going to end up.
I just feel like you're one of the many wonderful people I have on Instagram that I can throw ideas around with. It's been great.
Well, before we get rolling here down a rabbit hole or whatnot, tell everybody who you are, how you would introduce yourself within the context of clay or otherwise.
Cool. Hello, my name's Larissa Warren. I'm a ceramic artist, I guess. I pot as well. I'm an art teacher by trade. I left art teaching about 4 or 5 years ago. I've been playing with clay for a long time, but I think I'm most recognizable on socials and stuff as Ratbag Studios. That's just an old nickname that stuck. And the story of that Instagram name is, when Instagram was quite young and you didn't realize how a handle was a handle, there's no going back. I'm not a production potter by any means. I really love education and learning and the research side also behind ceramics. So I'm definitely someone that dabbles in lots of areas. If anything, that was a criticism from my very first uni degree, was that I never stopped experimenting, and sometimes I needed to just kind of stop and finish a project off. So I definitely like experimenting, and my work probably shows that. I think we'll go into more nitty-gritties, but that wouldn't be my official bio. But
I think it's probably more interesting than an official Well, and I didn't realize it was only 4 or 5 years ago that you had stopped formally teaching.
Well, yeah, I was really, really lucky to have a part-time position. So I worked 2.5 or 3 days. And the kids are a bit younger too, but yeah, I was able to kind of do that practice. But the jump, I don't know if it was, you never know when it's the best time, but it was the time when, oh, actually, there is a bit of a story. I was listening and heads up to these amazing Australian women potters that changed everything for me. But we were at the Australian Ceramics Triennale and there was a talk with mid-career female artists talking. And it was one of those moments they were all talking about still working amongst having kids and other challenges, but they were just so, they were so determined. And when I came home off the plane, my husband looked at me and he goes, "Oh, you're going to quit, aren't you?" And it was like, I think it was in the making, but there was this look on his face like, "Oh, we're both now going to be sole traders." Okay.
So your husband's self-employed too?
Yeah. There's no sick leave in his family. Yeah.
Which is like, hypothetically is supposed to be a good thing, right? Because it means you can take as many vacation days as you want to take.
Well, it's weird because there's days where we'll just stop everything and because of the schedules and we'll just garden and you go, well, this is a day off, we wouldn't be able to do this. Or we are planning a trip for a week down to Tasmania in June. I have cleverly incorporated a workshop there as well. But then the rest of the time, it's going to be family time. So that's a pretty cool job.
Yeah, that's what Sandy kind of introduced to me when we were just in Australia. Well, ironically, you were not there.
Well, you just did the same. Yeah.
I historically would have always thought about, okay, in order to travel, you kind of have to prepare all the work to be gone. You have to save up money. You have to do all these things. But, in Sandy offering for us to use her space to host 2 workshops, to be blunt with everybody, that funded our trip. I mean, okay, we had to pay for it on the front end, obviously, and whatnot. But between booking flights on credit card points and hosting a workshop, it was like, oh, this is how self-employed maker, this is a sustainable thing to then do in the future if we want to go visit another place potentially.
Definitely. And then there's part of it you can do as a tax deduction too. And whether you're traveling for professional development as well. So, and then you also, there'll be 4 of us going and the family knows that one of those suitcases will be full of pots that I then sell for our pocket money. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And that's what we did. The money we spent there was the cash from we didn't have to exchange currency and all of this type of stuff. So we're getting way in the weeds on how to work around a system to travel.
I'm just laying down the future for many other teachers that are leaving their jobs.
But it does just make it more, that, and also the beautiful thing I think of, especially of ceramics, maybe of some other industries, is it when you do start to know people around the world. The beautiful thing for us, as we were explaining to people once we came home who were expecting all of this very tourism oriented stories, we were like, well, we were going to see friends. And had the great luck that our friends have a spare room. So it just changes travel.
But that experience you had, I still think is better than perhaps, well, it's different. But what a journey. And yeah, you didn't go and walk over the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but you met people and you were immersed within a community straight away. It's amazing.
And we still saw Sydney Harbour. We saw the Opera House. We saw the bridge. We did spend 2 days in Sydney, but you don't need that much time to do the tick the list of any location to see the sights to say, okay, there's the Opera House. Tick, rode a ferry. Tick. But anyway, well, tell me a little bit. So how has your husband always been self-employed? And then you took the leap, or tell me a little bit about how.
Yeah, okay. I don't talk about this part much, but I'll talk to you a little bit about my son and how he was also part of the reasoning of, and I try and not say I believe in fate, but I just had to write a bit of a story about us coming to Tambourine Mountain. And I was like, there was a lot of things that kind of happened one after another that made everything work. Yeah, so no, my husband we actually met in high school, but I won't go that far back. But we didn't marry after high school, but we stayed really good friends. But he was a very smart young man and he worked really hard to get into psychology. And he's now an electrician. I went in and did a Bachelor of Fine Arts, but my area was darkroom photography and fine art photography.
Hilarious.
Yeah, so we have that. Look, I did some weddings and stuff as well, which I thought was just 12, 14 hours of speed. Like, it's such a crazy thing. But that photography background is wonderful. I knew that, but I was like, geez, I was only 17 when I got into university. I was really young. So I finished that first degree in 3 years. And then I went and did, what do you do? I had nothing to say. There was no life experiences to talk about. So, I went in and did a Bachelor of Education. And I was stuck. I was back in a school institution by the time I was 21. After a couple of years, I went overseas and I taught A-level photography, which was amazing. Like, that's college level in the UK. Then came back over. When photography phased over into digital, even though there's still some schools doing the darkroom, in my art career itself, because I was an art teacher, I was able to play with all the mediums. And I also have a long history of ceramics in my family. We can talk about that, I guess. Yeah, so I've always been played with clay and hand building and figurative work, actually, which is really, really different to my work. But so I kept teaching, I would say, Scott, I don't know, maybe it was only a year or 2 years before we moved up here. So he's probably been out on his own for about 6 years or so. It finished off with an employer and he'd gone out and got his contractor's license. But that was great. And then the move up here was interesting because we just lots of things happened. We always wanted to move up here. We're only about 45 minutes away from the Gold Coast, but it is semi-rural. So you have your own water, you have your own septic. It's a small town community and it's quite, we're about 550 meters up from sea level. So the weather is different as well. But we always thought, if we move up there and we have the kids up at the school, we should be working up there as well, because if there's issues. But we moved up here and I actually started a teaching position up here. And that's the one that I came back and resigned from. But I think also, and I had to explain to the school, it's not you, it's me. You realize that I made a lot of changes for a reason. And I've put that in place because you keep thinking about security and you need this and need that. And I realized there was just so much going on in my career, in my art career, that I just couldn't do both anymore. And we're also renovators. So we were renovating this house as well. There was just so many things. And then going to Oscar, he's my youngest. So he's on the spectrum. He's got autism, also recently ADHD, which doesn't seem to be much in the play. But I'm being a teacher, I've always been a huge advocate for him. We worked really hard on a lot of therapies to get him into mainstream schooling. So he gets support there. But a lot of the things that we do with Oscar, we stopped it was just so hard going out and changing routines because that was hard on him. And then it's amazing how all the protection things you do for your child, those qualities kind of become your own now. Like, when I go food shopping and they have quiet hour, I'm like, oh, this is nice, because you're so used to tensing up when you hear the hair dryers go on or the hand dryers in the bathrooms because that affects your child. And then you seem to take on those qualities. And so our life is so much pared down now. Yeah. So that was one of the other things too, is we're like, geez, wouldn't it be good if I was available when the school rang, or if he had 4 days at school and it was just too much and we knew that 5th day was going to put him over the edge and that I could homeschool him that day or we could do something else. And it's just, and we could continue taking him to speech therapies and things. And I recently was talking to someone also at another Triennale and we were just at the airport and having a chat. And I don't know why, but I just started talking about these things that I do with Oscar and how, his sensitivity kind of now I said, I never realized, but I was doing that in my ceramics work where I use contrast and the super smooth porcelain and the contrast. And a lot of those things are kind of, it's not symbolic. It just happens naturally. You take on those qualities and then they just resonate with you. So anyway, it's a long story, but so we reduced our mortgage by moving here, but also we just think differently. We spend less. We're a bit more resourceful as well.
That's amazing. Hearing you talk, it sounded like, with staying conscious of environment for your son, it sounded a little bit like the conversation completely unrelated, but that we were having with Sandy while we were there about inspiration for work and how you things have to sit in for a while because then it comes out through your subconscious instead of through your conscious, right? So like talking about contrasting textures or different things like that, you're consciously aware of so many things as a caretaker but then it starts to come through in your work in a way that you're not actually like, oh, I'm doing this because I'm trying to say something about.
Oh, yeah. The multi-layers are never, it's not purposeful. You just find you're doing these things. And at the extreme, you want to make it even more smooth. So you polish it even more. And then you're looking for more textures that when the firing will happen, you know, those minerals will explode out of the surface and you want to take the, yeah. But I mean, that's my experimentation kind of coming into play as well. It was just little elements like that I started only recently reflecting on and thinking, yeah, some of those qualities that have eked into our lifestyle, you know, and like when we go out or I do a social event, then I'm done for a couple of weeks. So it's kind of that introvert, extrovert thing.
This is literally what has happened to me over the last 3 years with 2020 and the total like stop of anything, realizing, you know, I was go, go, go constantly up until we couldn't anymore. And then realizing, oh, I actually don't want to go back to that. And it's been really strange for friends or other people for me to say, actually, I need to stay home because they're not used to me saying no to anything. But yeah, once you kind of start to pare back, it becomes really just.
I think what you're saying is once you say no, it becomes very addictive.
True. But I also like thinking about the fact that the two of you, and also as a family, you know, I think a lot of people when they're asking like, okay, how do I go full time? How do I quit my job? How do I do these things? And it really comes down to thinking about logistics. And it comes down to thinking of like, well, what are you willing? I wish I had a better word than sacrifice, because that sounds like a very, I don't know, weighted or negative word in my brain. And it is a sacrifice, but also if you're making changes because of something else that you want more, it doesn't feel as much of a negative.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if it's a sacrifice because you just change your priorities. You know, like having a newer car is not a priority anymore. And not getting the house completely renovated. You know, every time someone comes to my home that's new, the first thing they receive is an apology about how the staircase isn't finished. And then you realize you've been apologizing about the staircase for 4 years. You're laughing because it's true to you as well, I can tell. But, you know, it's just those priorities, but also because I haven't had the housewarming, so it doesn't matter. The house is, but the things that we need finished is finished, you know, and we'll just get to it. But yeah, you start thinking about why did I care about that so much? Yeah. And also like little things, we're not close to any shops now. Well, there's a local kind of little shop that's very quite overpriced. It's for your milk and bread if you're desperate. And now you tend to just look in the cupboard and go, I reckon I could do something with that tin of tuna. You just get a bit more resourceful.
Right.
It's horrible to say, you know, I'm sure you've heard people say there's been some positives out of the lockdowns because you've learned to stop and your body stopped. And also, you know, working for yourself, there's so much going on all the time. There's so many rewards, but there's also that sense of that you sometimes do wake up and feel like you've aged on a triple time and you just got to look after yourself.
And it's so hard to, at least for me, the thing I'm having to learn is it's so hard to prioritize yourself sometimes, right? Because it's kind of like, okay, but I need to do this because as we were joking at the beginning with vacation days, like if I don't do it, no one does it, right? And so there's, at least in my brain, a little bit more pressure than if you were a part of a team and someone else is setting the task list or the whatever. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, I need to get that done, but it's 5 p.m. I'm shutting the computer and I'm, you know, clocking out kind of thing, clocking in, clocking out. Whereas we don't, it's just always there. You don't really clock in and clock out.
It's good, you know, like I had to remind Scott the other night I cooked, which happens sometimes. And, you know, he was still texting a client and I was like, yeah, I don't think you need to. I think that can wait. And, you know, sometimes you've got to give the other person a reminder too. And then other times you have to tell the other person, no, I need to do this. He looked at me and as I was just, because it's quite early in the morning this morning, he looked at me like, why are you getting up? And I was like, I need to do this. And he gets in, he just rolled over. You know, when I did leave full-time teaching, I did envision myself being in here on the wheel and just pots. Like, you know, when you see people on Instagram and they have those lines of pots, I know they're production potters, but I envisioned that. Like, this is my space and I'll have lines of pots here. And then, oh, I've got to put them in the kiln. I've got to do that. Some weeks I'm not even in here. I'm like, what did I do? I'll be really honest. So my business plan is my pots don't pay the way. And I just had to justify that on a postage claim to the people. It was quite demoralizing. No. There's no added value on these pots that I've lost and I'm claiming for. Like, I still do. So I do professional development for teachers now. I will still go and do residencies. I'm planning quite a big tour of other women's work that's going to go around the country next year. So I'm curating. I do research projects. Like, you do lots of other things on the side. So there are weeks where, I just want to come in and be that person that makes a line of pots. And then when I'm doing those line of pots, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm all over the place. I think the only time if I'm making a body of work for an exhibition, I'm in here and that's it. And nothing stops me. And I do work past the nighttime hours. But isn't it fun to do that with your job, to mix it around?
That's kind of the exhilarating, at least for me in the beginning, it was like, oh, I'm never in one role. And that's the exhilarating thing for my brain, is that you're always having to kind of problem solve or troubleshoot or figure out something. You're not a cog in a wheel. And so you're having to be a marketer, IT person, and then a researcher, and then all of this different stuff. There are some days where I think, oh my God, can I just have one job?
Well, I just did a day of, I'll go and do supply teaching occasionally. And they called me yesterday and half the day was just traveling with the tennis team. And it's really, so teaching in Australia is very different. Probably, some American teachers get a good pay, but we get paid really well as teachers in Australia because I'm a senior teacher too.
I'm guessing for you, supply teaching is like substitute for us. So when a teacher's out.
Yeah, substitute. And there's nothing, I don't have to think at all. I just rock up at 8 a.m. They give me these classes. They could be anything. A lot of times they do give me the art classes, which is so much fun. I love being back there. And you do the classes and that's it. And you walk away and you get it's great. It's a great boost so I might do one of them a fortnight. And I really love it. You sit down, have lunch with everyone and you chat and they all keep looking at you going, you look different. You look different. Because it's the same school I used to work at. They're like, you just seem lighter. And you're like, I know what it is.
Right. I was going to say, it's like you get the fun aspects of why you were passionate about teaching without having to take any of the rest of the chaos home with you.
Yeah. They're all groaning about sitting on the bus for an hour stuck in traffic. I'm like, this is awesome. Just sitting on a bus doing nothing. Right.
I love it. It's sounding to me like having all the disparate things, even with still traditional teaching off and on, or your different research or your different curations, a lot of that takes a lot of the pressure off of your work as well, to where you can explore your work how you want to instead of having to become a production potter, right?
Yeah. And look, when I was talking about leaving teaching, my accountant actually said that. They said, oh, don't do that. Because I said, I need to leave teaching in order for my work to actually expand and to develop. And she said, well, I think if you leave teaching, you won't have the finances to allow that to happen. But it hasn't. It's been, and I remember thinking that and I thought, well, I can't keep looking in that one perspective. That's an accountant's. And yeah, it's exactly what you said. I've changed it where I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to look after, my husband hurt his hand. He was out of work for 4 weeks. So it was all up on to me. And the pressure was there, but there's things in place. Yeah, you just have to kind of think a bit creatively. With COVID, I started doing the online workshops. They've been amazing. I would never have done an online workshop, the idea of Zoom and stuff. And now I sign up for online workshops and take them as well as, I teach them. And it's been wonderful.
How many are you doing now and to clarify for everybody, this is for clay. These are clay workshops. And I think there are a lot of your marbling and wild clay discussions, right?
So I will offer specialist workshops. I tend to the people that sign up are people that are already have an artistic practice or gone past the hobby stage. Not that, I do have some hobbyists I do still start at a beginner stage. I do find that people want to get more specialist knowledge off me. And I really like teaching at that level too. So yeah, I do. Currently I'm offering, it's called Color Happy, and it's the colored clay Neocomi, but it's also the way I talk about it is it's not a traditional, if you want to learn how to make a rosette pattern, go onto Pinterest. You're going to find it there. I'm talking about a different approach to color. We talk about color theory and working as an artist to try and find your way with color. I'm going to show you a process, but let's talk about how many different ways it can go. And I really like doing that with artists, that particularly in person as well. if I have a workshop with 10 people, I really like that consultancy time and saying, well, how can I help you find more of a voice, or what have you been struggling with? And I found that that's very attractive, because sometimes as artists, we have things like communities that you offer and there's other things, but sometimes you can't keep talking to your friends about your artwork. They're going to get bored. And I found that too. I had a best friend that actually got really angry with me years ago, and she said, find yourself a therapist or an art consultant or something and stop talking to me about it so much. And it was a good slap in the face to realize, oh yeah, because I was just so excited that I just couldn't stop talking about these projects. And she was like, yeah, I'm still teaching, and I'm not in that world. So anyway, so I found that that's also something that artists, we need. It's really nice to have that time. One person I signed up for is I did the Evolve program with Amy Kennedy. She's a Melbourne artist. She's fantastic. That was like almost a year-long program I did with her. And it made me realize, we all need that consultancy time. But going back to the online workshops, I only do maybe 3, possibly 4 a year. And then I do the online workshops. I tend to try and find a studio space to host that with.
That makes sense. There was a question. I didn't write it down. I should have, but I was listening.
See, I do what you do. I go off on tangents.
It's fine. It's fine. It's so much easier when you're doing all the talking. I know what it was. What I love in hearing you talk about the way you teach with your workshops and that consultancy level is that's exactly what I think about. That's why I have such a hard time trying. I've thought about doing the styling course as like an on-demand thing because all the lessons are recorded, but I feel like there's so much conversation to have with people as they're working through the material, because it's not just necessarily 1 + 1 = 2. And I think so many of us have been tricked into thinking, like with advertising and consumerism and all of this, that you can just buy something to fix a problem. If I just buy the right camera gear, if I just buy the right clay, if I buy the right, foot tool or something, the right wheel bat, the right whatever, it'll fix this problem, when really it is about exploring for ourselves. It's about, I'm constantly having conversations with students of like, they're always asking, is it a good photo or is it correct? And I'm like, well, what are you looking for? Is your style mostly neutrals or contrasting colors? Do you want to have cohesive images? Do you want to have contrasting images? What's your pottery style, and how is the imagery going to reflect that? There's not a right or a wrong. There's people who have completely different looks to their images taking the same course because their style is completely different.
I'll be honest, I teach this way, but also to protect myself, because I don't want everybody that does the workshop with me to reproduce the same work. And when I'm in a conversation and it is live and I create a relationship with the people that are in the workshop, we have like a private little Instagram group also, but I want a relationship with you so I can make you realize that I'm a person and that I'm an artist. And you may have joined thinking, oh, I like her work. I'd like to try and make that work. And so then I'm like, haha, no, I'm going to send you off on your own journey. And so it's me protecting my work as well. I'm not that I'm saying you could potentially, it's just, we all know you can't replicate someone's work, but it's to try and say to someone, I want to give you something special. I want to give you your own unique approach. And I think that when you have that relationship, that talking, those conversations, every workshop goes in a different way. But after you do a workshop with me, or hopefully you understand, oh, why would I want to work that way anyway? Why would I want, she's doing that because of this, this, and this. I need to find something that resonates with me. I tell this to my art students all the time. Materials and your approach with materials are your concept. They tell, you've got to use those to tell your story. They're all interconnected. And so someone might look at my work and they'll go, oh, I also want to dig up my own wild clay and work with neochromy and colored porcelain. And that's cool, but it's got to be also, those materials have to be something to them and they have to have a connection with that. Otherwise, you're going to get bored. You can't keep doing that. And you can see that in some people's feed. You'll see something and go, oh, that's interesting. That looks similar. But then you'll go through and then you'll see, a couple of months before that, another artist that you know and appreciate, and you'll see something similar there. So they're jumping around, and that's okay. You can see that they just need to, like, that artist is striving. They're wanting something for themselves. They'll get there.
This was the big conversation you and I started having, among other things, but most recently on Instagram was, where we draw the line on mimicking other people's work. And I was saying, like, when I see someone's feed that as I'm scrolling, I can see, oh, you found Larissa's work. And then, oh, you found Joe at Old Forge, or oh, you found Cara or Kurt or whoever else. That is a person that I can see like, oh, you're exploring this medium. You're just figuring things out. And that's like in a learning phase. To me, that's totally fine. When I see someone kind of latch on to something because it's trending and they're selling it, then that's to me where it starts to rub a different way, because it's like, okay, well, now we've brought in monetization to this and you're using someone's style directly because it's popular and to sell it, which is a different feeling than what I was likening to with photography. Like when I first started, I looked at people who I respected and wanted to learn how they made those images, and I copied them. But then I figured out how to make it my own. Like the copying was that brief phase of education that if you don't move past that, you've missed the whole point. You have to iterate from there.
I just truly don't think that those people have that connection that I talked about to keep them going. I think those people that are selling work, well, unless they find a connection along the way, and I think that's good because then their work will naturally change anyway.
Exactly. That's what I meant.
It's so easy when you're away from it to speak calmly and not feel emotionally attacked or anything, But when it's happening, you get all pent up and you're like, wow, you do feel like right now I'm feeling chill about it and like, oh, everybody will move on. Everyone's going to find their way. I want everyone to find their way with clay.
It's amazing also how trends ebb and flow, right? Because like the Wild Clay book just came out. So I'm sure there's been kind of a surgence from there. Whereas 3 years ago, I don't remember people I knew people who worked with wild clay, but it wasn't like a movement, a trend, a thing.
Well, it was just the way things are done. And I think the word wild clay is also a bit, I think it's going to maybe be the wabi-sabi. In our area, anybody that was working with clay before the 1970s was digging their clays. That's it. When I was researching about processing my clays, I was just digging out the old books by Milton Moon and the Feeneys and Harry Mermet, that, these were the guys that were just processing clays and working with it. It was just in every clay book about how to develop your own clay.
Yeah, the assumption was never you were driving down to a shop and buying a box of 50 pounds or 25 kilos or whatever. Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating. Well, we won't settle too long on that particular subject because it's too early in the morning for you to have a cocktail, probably. Well, tell us a little bit about the last 4 or 5 years from quitting the full-time job and being full-time. I think is such a sweet spot of you're not new anymore. It's not super fresh, but also if your journey is anything like mine was, it's also kind of in this point where the newness, the shininess of the newness has worn off a little bit. You're kind of, I'm making assumptions, potentially in the grind of it, noticing where the things that, I don't know, the gaps are, things that need fixing, what's working, what's not working. But also, I don't know, I just remember I don't have a well-formulated question here at all.
I think I understand what you're saying. After a few years of looking at where there's ebbs and flows and you do start understanding, but then everything's kind of changing a lot too. We've just had, I think it's 9 or 10 interest rate rises in a row. I've seen a decline in sales. I used to have sell-out shop updates. They've slowed down now. I think things are changing definitely. Actually, I would say after 4 years, I can't say any year has been the same. And that's probably why I feel a little bit tired, because there's no formula has presented itself to me. But also that's my fault too. If I was just making restaurant wear and doing the same formula, but I'm not. I tire easily or I really like new projects. So each year has been different. And so, last year and perhaps this year, the online workshops have helped. So the way I look at that is I'll do an online workshop and then that will look after me to do a body of work. I still feel like if you said to me how you're making money next month, I don't know if I could answer you, that's pretty scary. I shouldn't have even...
Pretend you didn't just say that.
Yeah, it's quite unstable. This has been very good to talk to you today.
And we're like, and now we're done. Go lie down. Take a breather.
I have a paper desk. Like I have the old traditional desk calendar And I have things plotted out on that. I'm pretty old school. I have a whiteboard in here for my firings. I like writing things down. There are things plotted in. I've got workshops coming up. I'm working with some lecturers at Griffith Uni soon. There's lots of things kind of happening, but yeah, nothing's invoiced yet. But yeah, I was going to say to you, yes, it's settled in and there's this and this going. No, it's all different. It keeps changing. And I think you have to keep evolving. And I think people that work like me, that do bits and pieces or work as an exhibiting artist, unless you're secured with a gallery, I know that a lot of exhibiting artists, they have things slotted in for the next couple of years. But no, for me, I'm playing month to month. And I guess that's where if I have to, I'll take on more teaching work, or perhaps if things were quiet, I might start renovating the house and Scott will have more work. Yeah, we'll play it as it goes.
But I feel like also, just to give yourself a little credit, you do know what things you can kind of turn off or turn on, right? So it's always interesting how I always, for the longest time, thought this was such a huge risk. And then I looked back and realized that in the time that I had started my business during these last 13 years, there was a really big newspaper in Chicago. I think it was the Sun-Times. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. That literally just fired all of its photography staff one day. And so I think about we know what's going on in our businesses. This is why I hammer people over the head with knowing your numbers so much, because even though you might say, okay, I don't know what's coming in next month, you know that you don't know what's coming in next month. So okay, maybe I need to reach out to this gallery or, accept a few more substitute teaching days or this or that. Whereas traditional employment, even though the perception is that that's less risky, when I think about that team of photographers showing up to the doors being locked and them having not a clue that that was going to happen, so nobody prepared, nobody had saved up 6 months' income in order to go off and do their own thing. It was just an emergency kind of situation that they were presented with. That to me is almost the lack of knowing in some ways is riskier.
I definitely agree. I've got to be honest. I do know what I'm doing next month, but it's so many multifaceted things. I just don't want to bore the listeners. But I do. As soon as you said that, I was like, that's so true. I am so resourceful now. And I always have so I have a business, we have business accounts and then we've got our personal accounts. And I've always got some leftover money in that business account ready. And yeah, I've got shops or online access to other shops. There are things in the waiting. I have got people waiting for stuff. There is always things in the background, and then projects that there's different priorities on them. It just feels like, I just couldn't say to you, oh, next month I'm planning to do this only. There would just be so many, lots and lots of little things. And then just like you said, you're reaching out to certain studios. There'll be a studio that's been asking me to do a workshop for a while, and there'll be a pause. The one thing I don't do is commissions. I don't take on commissions, and I never have, but I was talking to a friend of mine recently and I said yes to a commission. And she said, oh, you must have been feeling really insecure. And I said, oh, I'm regretting it so much. But I said yes to this. And then I've always said commissions are just not a thing for me. I don't like to try and replicate a past artwork, and that's what often happens. Or I just want to work with a particular flow. And then, of course, you make the piece and that person goes, oh, even though they were loosey-goosey in the email to you saying, oh, I don't mind what you create. And then you show it to them and they're like, oh, everybody always has perceptions of what they want. And so I just have to be honest and go, you know what? You got me in a point of weakness. I'm pulling out, and I've got to put a little sign up to remind myself to not do it.
I think it's interesting how we all define them also, because I think the ones that I hear from people about being the really terrible commissions are either like a one-off piece that is either something you don't normally make, or there's some aspect to it that's not like it within your usual kind of line. Because if I define a commission as like what we're talking about doing with production work is like, well, if we can present somebody with, here's the catalog of shapes, here's the catalog of glazes, you can pick which two you want to pair together. We can work within that world. That's fine. Francesca will say yes to that commission, but not to, we've never made a casserole dish in our lives and we're not going to make one anytime soon, even though a lovely relative asked us to.
Yeah, I think it's also just the fact that every time I make a block of Nerikomi or pattern, I don't make it in bulk. Every body of work has its own pattern and work and color. And I purposely work like that. And I really enjoy working like that. I love the fact that you can see where I was at with each body of work. And when someone shows me an image of past work, and particularly with the clays as well. So, because part of what I really like doing is, so Tamborine Mountain is an old volcanic area, and the clays, the colors are just so diverse, but they'll pick a piece and it's from a year ago, and I can't go and redig those clays. That clay might have come from when someone was digging a pool, or there was a footpath being dug up, or my daughter walked across from the school one day and said, we found this in the garden and the science teacher thought you might like it. Like, that's how I get my clays. Normally it's a very frustrated gardener that gives me a call. So those distinct colors and textures, I can't redo. That's my biggest, and that's what I love about it, but also it's not commissionable. Perhaps shapes are, but then also I find that boring. I've just said my parents have just had their 50th wedding anniversary, and they were involved in the floods in Northern Rivers. And we have a really big pottery collection from my grandma. She was a gallery curator from a pottery in Melbourne in the 50s to the 80s. But mum and dad were working with a lot of stuff got destroyed. So they brought out this beautiful old pottery set, dinnerware set. But we were worried because every time they put it in the dishwasher, the glaze is fading, which shows that the glaze is not probably a durable glaze. And it was like a beautiful orange color, but we just thought, okay, that might be taking on a bit too much moisture. We don't know how it was fired and stuff. So I said, for your 50th, I'm going to make your whole dinner set. But at least I know my mum and dad would be happy with what I make. Like, I know how they eat their pasta and how they eat their cereal. So I know those aspects. And I think they'll be okay with whatever I do, and they'll be okay with my recycled clay and stuff like that. Yeah, they're my parents. They have to accept it. But still, it's a big, massive undertaking to do a full dinner set for me.
Yeah, that's like Francesco's happy place, but that's because he's very gladly a production. But I'm like, These are two completely different things.
But it's mum and dad. You've got to do it for them. And it will I can't think of anything else I can give them.
Right. I have to change the subject because just yesterday I was on the phone with my mom and she was reminding me that she wants a dinner set. So she's going to listen to this episode. I'm going to be like, I know, Mom. I know. I'm working on it. I promise. Oh, shoot. Well, let's kind of just nitty gritty, like what life looks like and how you guys, as you've heard me talk so many times too about, it is hard to find makers where the whole family is within land of self-employment. That's probably a little bit different in Australia than the US because as every episode always, at some point I have to mention healthcare.
Yeah, it's not so much of it. Oh, look, we actually went private with Scott's hand surgery. And even though we pay for private, but it's always been there just because we think if we need surgery, he's an electrician. If he needs surgery, he needs to get it straight away. He doesn't want to go on a waiting list. But there's still so much extra out of pocket. And that was probably our first time of realizing that it hurt. But not hurt like American hurt. Like we're a few $1,000s down. And also it's hurt because he doesn't hear, like you can pay extra for salary continuance, but for a contractor, that's a lot of money, honestly. And you can't really claim until about 6 weeks in. And then, so for us, we just have it separate. We put some money aside for that. That's our rainy day. So no, healthcare is a lot. I don't know how most potters I know in America, their partner has security. So for two people to be out sole traders, that's very difficult, isn't it? I can't even, there's so much about that way of life in America that I can't even fathom. I just want to dig a tunnel, bring you all over here.
Maybe not all of us, just some of us. So when you got back from that conference and your husband knew right away, okay, you want to quit a job, was there kind of a preparation period or a timeline, or did you just give notice right away, or what was that transition like?
So I think I was we have semesters, 2 semesters, and I think it was a 20 weeks and I gave them 10 weeks notice. Like I gave them the rest of the semester. But I would have to say I was prepping. There were moments in teaching where things happened and you talked about those photographers. There was a moment when I was teaching and I felt like the school didn't support me and things were really shook up and I realized, hang on, I've got no backup. And I didn't like how, there was just an event. Teachers always have those events where, something happens with a parent and you don't feel as supported or something. And I remember Oscar was really quite young then, and he wasn't diagnosed either. And I was getting really, really little sleep. And unfortunately, I don't think the employer could see any of that. They just knew that I didn't do what was expected. And I remember being asked, well, what's wrong with you? And I actually then had to go home and ask myself, well, what is wrong with me? Why did you do that? You've always been a really good teacher and you always did this. And I thought, hang on, I haven't slept. I'm stressed. Something's going on with my child. I knew things weren't cricket. And we get a really good professional development budget when you're teaching. And I've got to be honest, I use that to my advantage. So I put down a 4-year plan and I got fantastic ceramic artists to come in and work with my students. And so then I would pick up on what they were doing, how they were teaching. I would ask them questions. I was working with Adobe. I was learning a lot of stuff with them, doing education programs. Yeah, I took up every opportunity. So while I was teaching, I used that time and their professional development budget to get ready. And so when I came home and said, oh, I'm done, I think that's why he said, oh, you're going to quit, because he knew I had this kind of 4-year plan. I was working towards it. And it was just finally got to that point where I thought, actually, I'm over ready. Yeah.
This is the interesting thing. I think if I were to make an assumption when I ask people about those that are full-time, how that came to be, they're either forced into it, like I couldn't get a job. It was the 2009, 2010 recession, like no one was hiring. And that's how I wound up self-employed. Or, talking to Sarah from Not Work Related, like she got laid off. So you're either kind of shoved into it and have to, or the people that are preparing for it sometimes get to a point where you're so prepared that it's like stupid not to, right? Because we do tend to be so worried of like it not working. And so a lot of times you probably could have started earlier and figured it out as you went along.
Yeah. And there'll be a little catalyst at the end, a little boom moment.
So you were kind of already preparing for it and then dove in, and I'm going backwards now because we were saying like each year since then hasn't ever really been the same, which I think I just wanted to repeat basically in case anybody hadn't heard that earlier, because I think that's going to be hopefully very comforting to a lot of people. Because I think a lot of people think they're supposed to have it all figured out before they go and do it, realizing you can't figure it out until you're doing it.
Yeah. I think it's also really important you have to have a look and realize how resourceful you are and what are your skills. One of the first things I did when I left teaching, I'd been doing residencies at other schools on my days off, which I really enjoyed. But then also I realized I'm really good at putting together an event. And so I put together this cool thing called Art and Clay. And I got all these other ceramic artists that I love. And so this is what I do now. People that I want to work with, people that I admire, I create an opportunity and I employ them. And so I had this, it was like a conference day, and teachers love a conference day on a Friday. You make it in a nice location. You make sure it's catered. You have a coffee truck. They love their coffee. You have little sweets. So there's morning tea and there's lunch, and then lots of workshops and hands-on workshops, because that was the other thing. I was going to so many of these conferences and you'd get there and you'd be in some warehouse it could be like an art manufacturer and they're putting on a workshop with an artist. You get there and you're in this boring workshop that's cold. And then they sit there and they do this PDF lecture to you, or their PowerPoint. And you're like, I just want I can't listen to you anymore. I need my hands dirty. And so I think that's also the change in approach too. When I do a workshop, apart obviously when you're online with me, you're sitting and watching me. But if you come and do a workshop with me in person, you've got, as I'm speaking to you, you're touching and handing out clay and we're working, and you can teach that way. And I teach high schoolers. That's how they need to learn. You can't sit and lecture high schoolers. Talk to them about cubism as you're exploding shapes, on Photoshop, or you're actually smashing something and talking to them about elements or breaking a movement down. You've got to do it practical knowledge, because that's how I learn. So that helps me. But yeah, so no, I create those opportunities where I have these artists that I just absolutely love and admire, and who would I want to hear from? And I bring them in. and pay them decent money too. I'm so tired of, if you do a workshop for a school, there's still this perception that if you're teaching for students, that it should be you get paid lower. Like, that's why I do a lot of professional development for teachers, because the budget for teachers is really great. I'll say, yep, my cost for the day is $1,000. I'm there for the whole day. And also I'll provide, there's lots of prep, and also I'm there available for consultancy afterwards. And I'll change your firings in your kiln. I'll get this set up. We'll look at all your curriculum. They're getting a teacher. They're not just getting someone that's walking in and knows how to wedge some clay. But then the same school will say, oh, can you do this workshop with our year 10s? There's 30 of them. You're going to make slab structures, like one of those workshops that are going to waste you away. And they want to pay me less than what I'd get supply teaching. So I find that structure interesting. So I started going, instead of me constantly trying to advocate for my skills in teaching your year 10 class, I just won't teach your year 10 class. I'm going to say, no, I don't do that. I'll do the workshop with the teachers and they can teach the year 10s. Yeah, I think it's going back to what you were saying, know your strengths. And like I was saying, I know that I can provide opportunities for other artists. I really enjoy doing that because then I get that selfishness. If I know an artist and I really appreciate their work, how do I become their friend? Well, I'll try and provide an opportunity or something for them. And there's an amazing artist I'm trying to get over from Western Australia right now. And I was thinking, well, what does this artist want? And she wants a family holiday and she wants to be able to. So we're talking about providing a residency. We'll do a day workshop, but then that will pay for her family and, we'll get an Airbnb out for her for a week. And then I selfishly get to go out to dinner and hang out with them and learn some things from her.
I love that. Because also what I'm hearing is that you're aligning the opportunities you're looking for yourself with opportunities other people are looking for themselves as well. It's a win-win for all of the artists and creating relationships while you're at it, which is, I think, integral to surviving doing what we're doing, because online, it seems like everybody's figuring this all out by themselves and posting to their Instagram and whatever, when really it's all, having conversations with colleagues. And unless you go out there and find a community for yourself, we don't otherwise really have coworkers in the traditional sense, in the way that you had, in a teacher's lounge in the school when you were going into a school every day, right? We don't have that without intentionally building those relationships together.
It's, definitely form your community. And it's hard to get yourself out there. I still I felt nervous about asking you to contribute towards that article I was writing. I'm there going, she's really busy and I'm sure she gets these messages all the time. It is scary to put yourself out there. Some people might not reply, and that's okay, or they'll be really busy. And sometimes people have to pull out of your project that you've organized, and it hurt. But then at the same time, you go, but you can't force someone to do something. You make an attractive offer that's going to benefit both of you. And I try to provide opportunities that I would love to be invited to. And same thing for teachers. We're a tough crowd. I have been at workshops where I've gone, they probably really could have taught this differently. Like, I can see they're a really talented artist and this is good. I'm glad I'm here, but geez, I wish we hadn't sat here for 4 hours looking at your PowerPoint. Like, the knowledge is wonderful, but I really need to move.
Oh yeah. It's underestimated how much work it takes to put in like a well-timed teaching experience.
Oh yeah. Developing curriculum. Yeah.
What is something about, kind of your day-to-day, your making, your business, whatever it is, take it wherever you want to, that we haven't really touched on, that you really feel like either you get asked all the time and you want to be able to send people here to say, here's the answer, or that people don't actually ask you about, or that they don't know, that you feel like, especially as you see more people coming into clay, like, hey, I really wish more people knew.
I think in relation to my work, I think from the outside, it looks a bit chaotic. And perhaps when you come into this messy studio, it might look chaotic. But there's so many things in plan and motion. And I think a lot of artists can resonate with this, that there's so much going on in here, and I'm talking, Amy Kennedy asked me this question. I often bring this up with a lot of people because I think it's the most fascinating question I've ever been asked. She said, okay, I want you to think about your practice and take away one of your steps. What would it be? And it floored me because I thought through. So she was saying, the making process. So you're making one of your large vessels. It's one of the wheel. Look at one of the examples. It's one of the wheel ones. You're using the wild clay. You're embedding the nerocomi. You're da-da-da. Take away one of the steps. And I do a lot of sanding. So I do sanding in the raw form. I bisque sand and then I sand at the end. And I was trying to think, maybe I could take out one of those sanding presses. No. It wouldn't give me that silky smooth effect. When I'm finished the pot, I come back sometimes and I pull back a thin veneer layer. Maybe I could take that away. No, because I need that visually to reaffirm what I've made. I was going through all of it. Well, what if I once fired? No, I couldn't do that. I need to do the bisque because then I sand afterwards. And then I was like, what if I didn't process the clay the way, I was going through all the steps. It was so hard. But I think she's naughty. She was tricking me. She was just making me think about my steps and my process. And if anything, it reaffirmed that there's a reason why I do everything. And it was just maybe there's some, for many other artists, there probably could have been someone that said, oh yeah, I don't need to do this step. But for me, all the testing, everything, all the things I do, there's so much testing of these clays to make sure that they will fit together because I'm putting contrasting shrinkages. Like some of the clays I collect can shrink up to 30, 40%. So everything has a reason. Well, no, the porcelain's not, but the wild clays, no, because they're volcanic. So they're kaolin in nature. They're derived from ash. But it was such a good question. And I always say that to other people now too. Think about your process. Is there a step you could take away? And if anything, the question is not, there might not be an answer, but it makes you actually realize how much we do. And even just like anyone that has, a kiln, how much we really truly know. Like I fire to a cone every single time because I want to be 9.5 exactly. And I know where the cold spots are. I know where the hot spots are. And even though that kiln will fire automatically with its program, I'll still be here every time that cone drops. I just need that in my process. Yeah. Anyway, I think my everyday, what I could say is it looked very simple, but there's so many things going on in the background. And even when I'm sitting there and I might have some greenware and I might be scraping back, there's that background knowledge that you have about how much you can push the clay at that moisture level. All those things. I love that about everybody's process, that I can give you all the tips and tricks, but there's something I do. And it's, if you've ever had an intern, I had a dear friend of mine now, but when the intern was here, Jo, and she'll listen to this and laugh, she would ask me questions. Why are you doing that? And I was like, it would take you back. It would take you back because you go, no, actually, why do I do that? And it was really good. It was really good. I'd be sitting in the sink, sanding something. She'd go, well, why do you do that there? And you'd be like, stop talking. It was really hard to go, oh, no one's asked me that. And why do you do this? And why do you do that? And I was like, that's what interns should do. But it was so challenging. And I'd have to stop and go, okay, I do this because, and then you'd have to explain it in words because it's all scrambled. That's the answer is there's a lot of chaos, but there's a lot of structure behind that. And yeah.
I love the phrase you used, background knowledge, because I think this gives me 2 words to something I've been trying to explain for so long, because I see so many people online, and in the best of worlds, people are just curious. People are excited that they found clay. They want to learn new things and they're just curious. But I see so many people asking questions of like, well, where'd you get that? What's that tool? How do I do this? How do I do that? When I think in their minds, they think if they have the answer, that will get them the results faster. But what you've just said and what Tamara, Brian, and I talk a lot about is that exploration and that discovery, and that even though it is a long process, which we generally don't like, right? We all live in instant gratification world. You're cheating yourself of the background knowledge, right? You can be, shown how to marble clay, but if you don't practice enough to understand the background knowledge of that greenware state or of the absorption rates or of all these different things, it's never going to be as successful as what you're creating.
Yeah. On a Tuesday night, I go and do just a wheel throwing course at another potter's studio. And often when you're correcting someone's spiral or something they've done in their pot or whatever, they go, oh, how are you so good? How are you so good? And I'm like, well, I have to be good because I have to make income from this. And, here in Australia, a full-time teacher will be on over $100,000 now. And yeah, it's a great income. For me to lose that income or leave that income, I've got to make similar or, around about. That's what I challenged myself when I first left teaching. I used to say, right, this is what I was making. Look, I probably make what I made in my part-time position now, I'll be really honest. So I was probably on maybe about 60,000 and I'll make similar to that. But then there's all the different tax appreciations and stuff that come, that's quite good. And obviously other benefits. But I look at that and go, that's my response. It's like for me to leave a position that was offering me that much security and holiday pay, I've got to be good. I've got to do a good job and I've got to know what I'm doing. And there is that attractive allurement. You do get quite a lot of people that are wanting to leave the security in the job. And yeah, you've got to do the hard work before it. I still remember in my early days, I would fill a kiln with work and I might pull out everything. And I think of it now and it crushes me to think of how much waste. But I might have only had 2 or 3 pieces that worked successfully. And I threw out the others. Or a couple of them, if they were good experiments, you'd keep them. But I had to say goodbye to that work that wasn't good. And there was plenty, and I still do it. There will be some kiln loads that I'll open it and it's shockingly bad and it crushes you. It really sits in your heart for a few days there. And then, but you need it for growth. You have to go back and go, okay, I know what I missed out or I know what I did there. I didn't test this or I pushed that too far. You have to evaluate that and you have to learn from it and you have to have those times. It feels, I don't know if you ever feel like this, but as a creative, I always think we invest so much in our learning and it's really hard to justify. We talk about value. I've just had to justify the value of these pots that I've insured that went missing because they only wanted to pay me wholesale value. And I was trying to explain to them, I don't wholesale. This is all the value. And plus more. And it felt almost demoralizing to say, no, they're not even, I sold them under their value. I hate to say that, but yeah, it's important that I looked through that and I was justifying and you have to constantly advocate. There is a lot of background to these pots and a lot of background to this and I'm deserving of what I'm asking for. Yeah.
That's the hardest. I mean, I think the thing nobody expects going into being self-employed, you just hit the nail on the head there for me, at least, is the deserving of what you're asking for. There is a lot of self-development and self-growth in running your own business and not just in the expected ways of, oh, you have to learn bookkeeping and accounting, or you have to learn how to manage people if you're going to bring on staff. And yes, those are all very pragmatic levels of growth of accruing knowledge, but also just being in self-aware, self-reflective, honest with yourself to say, okay, I've talked a lot before about the adjustment for me to go from working in a nonprofit world to being self-employed and having to say, this is the value of my time, this is how much I'm worth, was just, it took me years. It took me years to get, it's why I get on such a big soapbox about talking to people about pricing and how you can be really pragmatic and math-oriented with it, because that's the only way I got through that mental struggle of going from receiving a set amount of, a stipend or a salary, a set amount of money that somebody else decided and I said, okay, versus, okay, now I have to decide what is my hourly worth and what is, to look somebody in the eye and say, I'm worth this much is a very weird experience.
As you're talking too, I was just thinking, ironically, I did an interview with Paul Blaze and I think it was back in 2016. And if you listen to that interview, I'm in such a different mindset. I was like, why would I leave teaching? Why would I lose this security? And he said something to me, which I kept for a long time, is we were talking about pricing and I was talking about my cups. And my mum, who grew up in a pottery, I used to take her to exhibitions and she'd look at it, something and go, oh, that's ridiculous. Or she was just too openly, I was like, shh, mum. But also she'd see the price that I was pricing my pots at. And she was like, you can't afford that. And Paul said to me, he goes, but you're not your buyers. You're not the target audience. And yeah, I can't afford my pot. But yeah, I think it was so funny. My mum used to saying, well, who's going to buy that? And I'm like, well, we haven't met those people, mum. They're, But then also, I think by selling my pots at a certain price too, then I appreciate also when I see someone else pricing on a similar level, I can see And advocating is really important because you don't have to use the word advocating for your art. It's just, you're telling a story. And when I hope on Instagram and all those other social media platforms, or when I'm writing an artist statement or anything, I'm telling people a story and I'm giving them a little bit of me. I'm not advocating my skills and all those other things. Hopefully they can see that. But what I'm doing is I'm taking them on a little journey and saying, you're getting a little piece of what happened in that point of my life and my time. And this is this is something to be cherished, hopefully. And when I purchase artwork from an artist or be gifted something, that's how I feel as well, that I actually have a little bit of that person. And that's so special.
I think that's something specific to ceramics for me as well, maybe just because of the tactile nature of the medium. A big part of what Francesco's style is coming out to be is he always has throwing lines in his pieces. And so like you can feel where those fingers were as you're holding a mug or a cup or a plate or what have you, or different. As we've bought friends' pieces, it's like, oh, we can kind of sit down and have a drink with Sandy, even when we're now back in the States, because we have these little whiskey cups from her, or different things like that. It defines a vessel in a different way than what I've really ever thought about until we're talking about it now, in terms of holding that space for someone that's maybe unique to us as potters with each other. I don't know if our normal, quote unquote, normal buyers get this experience or not, but I don't know. Maybe they do if it's been gifted to them from somebody that they love too. Who knows?
Yeah. And Sandy's work too. I remember first seeing her work in a little Korean gallery in Sydney. And wow, as soon as I saw and was able to touch her work, it has such a feel to it. You can recognize her work. The way, I've seen her work and just the way her thumb flicks down in a particular way and the way the cup comes up on the bottom, and obviously her firing process. There's I feel foolish sitting here and talking about my process and my background when there's someone like Sandy Lockwood out there. I just feel like we're all amateurs. And then there's these people like, that have been working and not even talking about it. And they're just beautiful. And their work is so beautiful. And I hope to one day be at that level. That would be, I don't even think it will happen. I just think they're amazing. And I just love to have someone cherish work like that of mine. Yeah.
Well, and it goes back to what you originally said about the materials matching the style, matching the, like everything coming together. I don't think I really understood that at such a level until we went and worked in her studio, because like the stiffness or lack thereof of the clay bodies that she makes for herself directly inform. I mean, you couldn't help but throw looser when you were we couldn't throw our usual tight kind of stuff because she has created the clay that she needs for her style. And you kind of have to throw that when you throw it. You're not going to necessarily, you're going to be fighting against it to try and create something that's really stiff or, it just lends itself to her style. And so then you start to see how all of these things line up together as you explore this medium, which I don't think I would have otherwise thought about if I was still at the community studio, because when it's all just commercial stuff, then there's not that connection to thinking about how you can adjust something or change something when it's off of the shelf and that's how it comes. And
that's what, when you were talking about potters that you might see on their feed that they run through different artists that they're trying to replicate, like how talented are they if they can do that? Also, how much money and resources do they have readily available if they can, replicate different artists? Because like you're saying, I can't get out of this. This is a prison now. My process and the way I work, like everything has been built into that. That pug has my formula of clay. When you're talking about that's lovely because that's how I work and the way I process clay. My brain can't shift out of this. And it's a beautiful creative prison. But yeah, so I think sometimes when I see those artists that can replicate like that, they're dangerous. They're scary because that's really skill to be able to jump around. And if they're creating good works.
Right. Well, there's an if that we'll just let that hang in the air and we'll move on. Oh man, more than an hour has gone by very quickly. And I know it's a completely different time and day for you at this point. So
it's morning, but I really hope your readers are getting something from it. I mean, we're both the queens of going off on tangents.
It's true. It's true, but something comes out of it. Something always comes out of it. So, well, for people who haven't seen your work, want to find you online, where should we send them? Where's the best place?
Yeah, so it's my website is ratbagstudios.com and Instagram is ratbagstudios. I occasionally pop on over onto Facebook, and I think it's Larissa Warren, Ratbag Studios on that. Give us an email. The email's a good way. DMs don't always go through. Depends. Instagram's hard right now. I'm finding it, like, I go through different stages. Right now, I'm finding it hard to engage, and I feel guilty because I've got friends that I want to congratulate on their works. Anyway, going off on another tangent. But yeah, check it out there. I have a newsletter, and can I please say the newsletter is so important. That's the best way to engage with me.
You put so much work into this newsletter also. I just need to say, when you asked me to contribute, when I got the newsletter back, I was like, oh my God, you need to be submitting this newsletter to like publications.
Can I say, yeah, look, okay, if we've got the time, let's do a quick 2-minute thing on newsletters. Everybody is sending newsletters out right now. You go and buy, we just bought some sports shoes for the kids. We're getting the newsletters. We're getting the emails. And particularly at the start of the year, there's a big cleanse out. And so that's one of the reasons why every second or so newsletter, I try and offer something back, because otherwise it's all me. I did this and I did that. And it's pretty exhausting for me and my readers. So I feel like, well, you know what can I help you with, or what can I share with you? And whether it's just sharing some ideas. And that was a good old rant, that article. I needed to understand how I could move on from when I felt like someone was getting too close to my work. And that way was, wow, I got to interview Louise. That phone interview I had with her was amazing, the tidbits. And there was a few good slaps in the face from her, which was so good. I was like, oh, I do that. So she was that was so good. I was held accountable in that. And so articles like that, or even just, top 10 tips I do when I'm firing, and things that other potters haven't considered. Or I think about my audience and go, oh, they're not all potters, they're collectors. What are some other works that we should be looking at? All those kind of things. But yeah, giving back in your newsletter, because otherwise you will, you find at the start of the year, you can see when people unsubscribe, and it's because everyone's just getting
burnout. Yeah.
You've got to give something back. And yeah, so please subscribe to the newsletter.
The huge difference that we all forget is we lump ourselves in with the sport shoes and the very non-personal corporate businesses sending an obnoxious number of emails.
Targeted email.
Once a day, multiple times a day, like all of these things. And when you're talking to your audience in your newsletter, that's not the same relationship. Just by nature of what we do, yes, they're purchasing something from us. Maybe, yes, there's some level of consumption or transaction or what have you, but it's not in any way the same as me going out and buying a pair of sweatpants. Like, it's just not, or the email list that I clearly signed up because I know they're going to send me a 15% discount code for my first purchase before I go buy the socks or whatever it is. That's way more transactional.
But you are when the email box is full and people are feeling overwhelmed, you're still in that, like you got to shine out. And
true.
Yeah. And I hope people will remember, actually, I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was funny, or I liked how she shared this, or there was something other than just her flogging off a workshop and a collection of work. And then, also, I still go, 5 people unsubscribed after my newsletter. But then you got to go, well, hang on, that's cool. That's cool. They're not sailing the same ship as you. It's all good.
You just also have to stop checking. I do track my email subscribers. Like once a week, I go through a bunch of data stuff and just track things to make sure that okay, we're still going in the right direction. But I do not get any of the immediate notifications of so-and-so has unsubscribed or anything like that.
No. It's more like about 24 hours after I've sent out a newsletter, I'll look and go, oh, that's a really good engagement rate, or this many people opened it. And then it will say 5 unsubscribed. And I'll go, oh.
But to reframe that, it also just means that the group you're actually talking to is getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
That's a great way of looking.
You don't necessarily want, I think a lot of times, and this is the Instagram effect, everyone's looking at the top number. So when people talk about, I want to have 10,000 followers on Instagram or whatever, right? For some reason, that's the number that floats around in the ether. I don't have enough work to sell to 10,000 people. I wish that subscribers, followers, all of these things, it really should just say people or humans. And so like, if 5 people don't show up or unsubscribe in this example, you're just getting, it's like the difference between having, I'm going to make a wedding reference. It's the difference between having a 300-person wedding where like 30% of the people there were, family obligations or parents wanted to invite them, and the couple who's actually getting married has no real relationship with them, versus 40 people that they chose so intensely because that's like your inner core, your absolute closest people. And what is the experience of going to dinner at either one of those, right? It's a completely different thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm coming up to, I think, 25,000 on Instagram. And I might only have I think I've only got over 1,000 on my newsletter. But those newsletter people, they're my peeps and they're coming to dinner with me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm buying them all a bottle of wine each.
Exactly. And then when you do a workshop or when you do have something in person, I mean, as you've said, you're not a production potter. You don't have the work to sell to 1,000 people. So like you want the email list to be 1,000 so that then maybe 100 of them actually buy the work or whatever the numbers are.
Yeah. No, newsletters, people, they're great. Shout out to the wonderful people I get newsletters from. And I love it. And I love it when people have got their little niche. Beautiful maker Colleen. She has the garden curator and she has the most beautiful gardens and she shares the gardens. And I'm like, just that little piece of that person. It's great.
You and I have the problem with those. I had to unfollow a lot of house and garden ones because then you look out the window and go, I have so long to go.
This staircase is still not finished.
I'm going to send you a message of our outside staircase after we get off this call because you're going to be in tears.
Yeah, you started chuckling. I knew something was going on with the staircase.
To explain to anybody we talked about house renovations for a long time, you can get in the front of the house. The front staircase is very safe and perfectly fine. We redid the sidewalk, so we had to take off the back stairs because the old stairs was built over the sidewalk and a terrible, it didn't line up. There was this tiny little ledge of cement that you could break your ankle on walking down the sidewalk, walking down the stairs. So now we just have this rogue set of stairs that we screwed back into the landing, but has no handrails. It's just hanging out there until we properly fix it. You're gonna love it. Anyway, I've digressed. I've taken so much more of your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will put all those links for the website and Instagram and whatnot in the show notes. So wherever everybody's listening, go find the description on your podcast app because I don't know where they are.
Thanks for the chat. It was fantastic.
And we just grazed the surface on email newsletters at the end there, didn't we? But maybe more importantly, we also touched upon the difference between vanity metrics, like the number of followers you have on Instagram, versus conversions, like the number of people that actually buy something from you. Spoiler alert, it's the conversions that matter. But I'm supposed to be wrapping up this episode now, not starting a brand new topic. So if you want to dig into more of that conversation, be sure to pop over to episode number 313 called The Myth of Growth to listen to more. Or, of course, it is these types of conversations, the kind that need to go so much deeper, the kind that don't really ever end, the kind that you need colleagues who understand what you're trying to do to keep doing it. It's these conversations that happen inside of our community every day in every time zone across the world. You can learn more about this amazing group of makers and see if it's the right place for you by visiting makersplaybook.com/community. Not to mention, our community members are directly supporting the creation of this very podcast every single week. This podcast also keeps chugging along thanks to support from our sponsor, Amico.
Hello, I'm Bryce, Account Manager and Sales Solution Supervisor at Amico Brett, providing you with the best customer service in ceramics. This episode is brought to you by Amico Brett. Find Amico glazes and equipment at your local distributor. Welcome to Clay, and thank you for listening.
Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.